When you take all this into account, the 60-40 picture, and now evaluate the contention of the states, the terms of fiscal federalism are loaded against them, which is what I want to do. It's possible to argue on the contrary, and indeed I will, that Indian states enjoy more spending power and hence more political clout than their counterparts in other countries. And second, over time, the terms of a fiscal federalism have moved in favor of states. Take the center state expenditure shares. As I said, states spend as much as 60%. That share is much larger than what states in other countries enjoy, which is, for example, Brazil is 40, Indonesia 38, Australia 40, USA 40, India actually is more than that. Over the last 5 years, Indian states have been spending 63.9% of the total expenditure. What does it mean? More spending, more political power. We know that, right? Government spend, they get more political power, more clout. Second, if you tax, you lose votes. If you spend, you earn votes. So states are having the pleasure of spending without the pain of taxation, right? Relatively speaking. So center is taxing, states are spending. Second, tax devolution. The Constitution gives states a share in just two taxes: the personal income tax and central excise. States agitated over time, saying that this is not fair, that we're getting within the buoyant taxes of the center, we're getting a share in the less buoyant taxes. So the Constitution was amended in the year 2000 to give states a share in the total tax pool of the center. States have much greater autonomy on spending today than there is before. Because, as I said, the Planning Commission is abolished. So we were restrained, states were constrained to some extent in how much they spent, what they spent. That's gone. Now much of these transfers take place via the Finance Commission, states enjoying the privilege of deciding how to spend that. And now states have a much larger autonomy. The inference we draw is that states get a larger share of a larger pool and have much larger autonomy on spending. When the Constitution was amended in 1993, giving constitutional status to local bodies, 73rd and 74th Amendments, the understanding was that states would support their local bodies by transferring money to them. But every political functionary wants decentralization to his or her level and no below. So the Prime Minister says, why should we give money to chief ministers? They waste it. So he doesn't want to give money. Chief ministers say, why should we give money to Jilla Parishad chairman? They'll waste it. They won't give money. Centre saw this. So they decided there was no constitutional mandate or any requirement that they fund, but they started giving money through states to be transferred onwards to local bodies, both urban and rural local bodies. And here's the important thing. The share of transfers to local bodies out of the total tax pool has been increasing over the years. Centrally sponsored schemes are a mechanism for the center to signal national priorities, encourage spending on what they believe are good expenditures. States have had grievance against it. And they say, give the money to us unconditionally. Don't say this is for training rural women, this is for training teachers, etc. Just give the money to us, we will decide the priorities. And they say the CS's design is too straitjacketed. You know, what is good for Manipur may not be good for Kerala, but you have the same uniform pattern of schemes all over. Centre's argument is this. The argument that this is violative of the Constitution is not true. There is Article 282 in the Constitution which empowers any government to spend on any public purpose. So This is additional big spending, so this is not constitutionally violated. Take the GST. GST has had about 9 years of history now. The complaint of states is that we have surrendered our sovereignty, that we cannot decide anymore what the tax rates are. But so has the center. The central government has also surrendered its sovereignty. Tax rates, GST rates are decided by the GST Council, which comprises Finance Minister, Union Finance Minister and State Finance Ministers. So as much as the states have conceded the sovereignty, the center too has conceded the sovereignty. But ultimately, GST is a win-win option, and it's already showing promise. I sent the text of my speech to some RBI colleagues, and they've written back to me, they've given me some data to say that the tax buoyancy, the state GST tax buoyancy has gone up significantly over the last 9 years from 0.86 to 1.44. States are benefiting. Especially states with a low tax GSTP ratio have benefited even more. So GST has been a win-win, not for the center and states, and much more of a win-win for states which were fiscally handicapped earlier. The last one is limits on borrowing. This is what rankles most state government, because most state governments now want to borrow as much as possible. Under Article 293 of the Constitution, states are required to take the permission of the center for any borrowing they. And there's a proviso that as long as they're indebted to the center, every state will remain indebted to the center for the next 50 years, so that proviso is unnecessary. But states have to take the permission of the center for borrowing. And the Constitution also says that the center can impose conditions while giving permission for borrowing. In fact, some of you might remember that government of Kerala has agitated this issue before the Supreme Court. It is now pending before the Supreme Court. Government of Kerala has argued that this is unfair, this constitutional provision. If you look at other countries, in many other federations, states are not allowed to borrow, period. They're not allowed to borrow. In America, states have to balance their budgets. They can only borrow in the market for specific projects. Markets assume that there is a guarantee for states borrowing. There is no such guarantee in writing. But markets assume that. The reason is because the Reserve Bank acts as a debt manager, repays the loans at source, so markets have confidence that states will repay. So states are able to borrow at rates lower than what they would command in the market because of this constitutional provision, which they don't realize. The third thing is, as much as the center had the authority and power to impose conditions on any state while giving permission, over the last 75-80 years, they've never invoked a provision. And the most important thing to remember when you talk about borrowing is that India is one fiscal entity. Fiscal profligacy in any state is fiscal profligacy everywhere. Every state has to be fiscally responsible in order for the country to be collectively fiscally responsible. I know what you're all thinking now. You're all thinking that this guy is biased completely against the states. He's arguing for them. So to establish my credentials, I want to spend about 5 minutes admonishing the center. The center, one of the most egregious things that the central government does is impose cess and surcharge. In addition to income tax, he pays surcharge on income tax. What is the incentive for the center to do that? The incentive is that if it's tax, they have to share with the states. If it's surcharge, they don't have to share with the states. Just to give you a simple example, if the central government collects 100 rupees and the Finance Commission says give away 40 rupees, so the 100, they get to keep 60, give away 40. On the other hand, it is divided that 100 into 80 tax and 20 surcharge. They get to keep the entire 20 and 60% of the 80, which is 48. So they get 20 plus 48, 68, and the states get only 32. So there's a big incentive for the center to impose surcharge and cess, not directly tax. And that incentive has been growing. In fact, Reserve Bank people have pointed out to me that the taxable share has been coming down, which is that out of the total taxes of the state and of the center, out of the total revenue, tax revenue, cesses and surcharges are becoming a bigger proportion. And what they share with the states is declining. So there is, I believe, a case for the center to reconsider. Their argument is that we are levying these cesses and surcharge because we've taken on additional responsibilities like funding local bodies, etc. True, that is true. But I believe that there is need for greater transparency, there's need for some formula, and there's some need for some ceiling, which everybody understands and appreciates. Some more transparencies to impose some responsible behavior on the part of the center. Centrally sponsored schemes, again, I believe that some of the grievances of the states are valid. For example, one centrally sponsored scheme is training bamboo weavers. Now, how many states in the country have training for bamboo weavers? Many states may not even have that. And they can't use that money. And these schemes are not revised. States are not consulted. So there is need for the center to be more consultative, more conciliatory, consult with the states on the design of the schemes. You would review them every 5 years and give states a choice in a basket of schemes rather than just say that these are the schemes. Say have a basket of 50 schemes and each state choose 5 or 6 or whatever to the extent of your entitlement. That might be a better thing to do. The third thing I believe the central government must do is to enforce a code of conduct on freebies. Freebies is not there's been competitive populism. We saw that in Maharashtra election. We've seen that ahead of the Delhi election today. I admit that in a poor country where millions struggle for daily livelihood, it is incumbent, even mandatory, for the governments to give some transfer payments to the most vulnerable. But there's got to be a restraint on that. Why? Because these freebies are at the margin being financed by borrowing. You cannot borrow and give away money for consumption. It is like a household borrowing for performing a marriage or for going on a vacation or for a party. In principle, a loan must pay for itself. So if you keep on borrowing and use it for current consumption, your loan burden goes up. So there's got to be a restraint on that. The second concern I have about freebies is that each freebie is not evaluated against the big picture. If some chief minister decides that I am going to give free bus rides to women, have we done a study that giving free bus rides to women is the best way to support women? And most of all, as Chairman Mao said, if you give a man a fish a day, you support him for a day. If you teach him to fish, you support him for a lifetime. The biggest disappointment on freebies is that 3 years ago, the Prime Minister made a statement that there must be restraint on freebies. 2 months after that, they had UP elections, the BJP went on the spree of giving freebies. And today, they're competing toe-to-toe with AAP on giving freebies. So no party is sanguine, no party is sacred in this. Everybody is competing. There's need for the center, just as they've done FRBM, just as they've done GST, the need for the center to start a dialogue on this and evolve a code of conduct on freebies. At this time, I want to summarize what I've said so far. I talked about 3 phases in the evolution of India's federalism: the constitutional division of responsibilities, the 60-40 picture, how the center of gravity is shifting towards the states, the states' contention that the terms of fiscal federalism are loaded against them. I argued against that. But I also said, just to establish my credentials, that the center must be more conciliatory and more consultative. Center-state cooperation is vital for us to get to Viksit Bharat by 2047. The first generation reforms that we did in 1991, Dr. Reddy was part of that core team. The first generation reforms that we did in 1991 could be done by the central government without consulting the states, because they all fell in the domain of the center. Dismantling the license permit regime, liberalizing imports, opening up the financial sector. They did not have to consult the states. The second generation reform that we have to do today, factor markets, land, labor, taxation, as we saw over the last 15 years, they cannot be done without the consent of state. We saw that, for example, on Farmers Bill. We saw that on the Land Bill. We saw that on investment in single brand retail, foreign investment in single brand retail. So the second generation reforms, which are one of the requirements for us to get to a developed country by 2047, cannot be done by the central government unless states cooperate. So I believe center-state cooperation is